case, this Flickr photo ID might be have dots in it or whatever. Flickr picture. You know, it might have dots in it like the description has. Okay, I'll leave this way here, but value for key might be a good idea. So here I'm basically going to fetch into the database to try and find this unique photo, see if it's already there. And I do that by saying I need an NS error here. Then I'm going to say NS array matches equals context, because we always have to ask a context to do a fetch. Okay, execute fetch request, that request, and if there's an error, return an error. Okay, so now I've got those photos. Those photos, hopefully, in this case, a matching photo, or maybe not, has been pulled out. Now, this matches can have a number of different states or different values. One thing is, it might be nil. If it's nil, okay, or this error is not nil, I would say or error, or another error condition here is that the matches count is greater than 1, okay, because these are supposed to be unique. And so if I somehow got multiple photos by doing this, that would also be an error condition. So I have to handle error here. Handle error. We're not going to do that today, but you can imagine. Okay. Otherwise, if the matches found something, then we can just return it. Okay. So how do we return it? This is an array, but this array is going to have the one and only one match. So I'm going to say matches first object. You could also say last object. Otherwise, this matches.count is 0, so it returned an array, an empty array. That means I looked for that photo that had that unique, I couldn't find it, so that photo doesn't exist. Now I need to create it. Okay, everyone remember how to create an object in the database? NS entity description, insert new object for entity for name. We're inserting a photo, and we obviously have to specify the context. Okay, so we've created a photo. Excellent. And now let's go ahead and set the attributes of the photo. I'm also going to set the photo's unique, equal to unique. All right, so here I'm setting the photo's title, subtitle, image URL. So, so here I'm just setting the title using value for key path out of the Flickr dictionary, the subtitle getting the description, the URL, I'm using this URL for photo format thing. I have to turn it into a string. Okay, because can't put URLs in the database, but we can put strings there. And then I also have the photographer name. But I have a relationship to a photographer entity, so now I need to create a photographer as well. So here, loading a photo, right, from Flickr is causing a photographer also to be created. Okay, and this is going to happen in your homework too, in spades, okay, where you're going to download these photos from Flickr and you're going to build your entire database. Lots of entities are going to be created all the time, every time things come back from Flickr. Okay, so how do we create a photographer? Well, I'm going to do the same thing I did here, where I have this photo category that creates that. I'm going to do the same thing for photographer. So I'm going to say new file, another category. This one's going to be a category in photographer. This one's not Flickr specific because photographer only has a name. So I'm going to call this category, just to be different, create instead of Flickr. Okay, so we'll put this in the same place. Here it is right here. It's up here. And photographer, yeah. It's very similar. It looks almost exactly the same. We're going to fetch for it. We're going to handle if we can't find it, set the name, all that business. So let's put this in the header file. Okay, just trying to speed it up a little bit here, because you wouldn't learn anything new by my doing this all again. Okay, but now I have a way to create a photographer given a name in a given context. So we'll use that over here, and we'll just say photo.whotook equals, and we got to import that little category, photographer create, photographer with name, and the name is the photographer name that we got out of the Flickr thing, and same context. Okay? Everyone understand this method right here? So this method is going to, if we give it a Flickr dictionary from of photo info, it's going to give us back a photo object in the database, either by creating it or by finding one that's already there. Okay? And it'll return nil if it has a problem. Okay. Everybody got that? Okay. So now that we have this thing, we have these nice ways to access it. Let's talk a little bit about the table view and how we're going to display this stuff in a table view. And it's really a simple matter of creating a new table view subclass that implements that fetch results controller business. And I told you that you were going to have this core data thing to make that easy. So we're going to use that. Here is the core data table view controller. I'm going to drag it in. We'll take a look at it here. All right, so here's the core data table view. Here's its header file. You can see it just has this fetched results controller thing. It also has a way to force it to fetch, but you don't ever have to do that. It'll happen automatically. So it has this property. If you look at the implementation of this thing, besides setting the fetch result controller, which is mostly just a bunch of logs, okay, that I put in there, it's implementing UI table view data source, you see, in terms of the fetch result controller. And then it's also doing this delegate business where it's watching for changes in the database. Okay, and that's it. That's all it does. And this code is actually copied and pasted from the documentation for NS fetch results controller. So this is nothing exciting in here. So when we create a table view that wants to look in the database, okay, when we create an Objective-C class, we're going to make it be a subclass of core data table view controller. So I'm going to create one. I'm going to call it photographers. I'm going to call it CDTVC, core data table view controller. Okay, it's kind of a naming convention some people like to use. And so I'm going to do that. And because it displays photographers, that's what it does. So let's create that. Let's put it top level, same place as everywhere else. Here it is. It's created it. I don't need any of this business for that. And let's think about its public API. What does this thing need? Well, it needs what most things need that are doing database stuff. It needs a NS managed object context. And so this class, its job in life is going to be, it'll show you all the photographers in a given context, a given database. You give it a pointer to a database, it'll look in there and show you all the photographers in it. That's what this thing's going to do. Okay? So to make that happen, all it needs to do is set that fetched results controller thing in its superclass, right, which is this core data table view controller. So I'm going to do that. As soon as someone sets the managed object context, oops, let's call this managed object context so it's a little clearer. As soon as someone sets this managed object context, I'm going to be able to set up my fetch results controller. I can't set up my fetch results controller until I have the context. Sometimes the context comes to me via a public API like this. Some view controllers will get their context from other objects. Most notably, and pay attention here for your homework, if someone gives you a managed object like a photo or a photographer, you now have the context because NS managed object has a method in it called managed object context. It will give you the context that that object came out of, okay? So it's really important to understand. If someone gives you a photo, you have a managed object context. But this thing is at the top level. It's showing all the photographers. We don't have anything yet out of the database, so someone has to tell us the context, which database to fetch these things out of. So now I just need to say fetch results controller equals something, and so I'm going to create a new fetched results controller. Alloc init, and its init has all these arguments here. It needs a fetch request. Okay, well actually so we don't get this kind of wackiness, let's go ahead and make all the arguments first. It needs a fetch request because that's what it does, is hook up a fetch request to something. And so this is a request into the photographer table, right? So we want photographer. We're going to show all the photographers. The predicate for this thing is nil. What does that mean, predicate nil? Predicate nil means all of them. Okay? So if you say predicate nil, that means give me all the photographers. And sort descriptor, yeah, let's sort these things. Let's sort them by, let's see, sort descriptor with key. Well, let's sort the photographers by their name. Okay? Amazingly, you can actually sort things by things through relationships. So you can sort it by other objects' properties if you want. But here, photographer, we're going to have it sort by its name. And yes, we're going to have it ascending. And we're going to use the selector here called localized standard compare. Okay, which is what we use mostly for strings that are going to appear in the user interface. Okay, oops, we need to close our array there because this is an array of sort descriptors. We only need one. And we could limit, like, for example, we could say only give us 100. We only want to see 100 photographers, which would be kind of silly because we are sorting alphabetically, so this would not make sense because we wouldn't get to see the people whose names unfortunately happen to be end of the alphabet. So we wouldn't do it here. But in other cases, you would. In your homework, you very well might do that. All right, so now we have the request. We have the managed object context. That's an argument to this method. Is what we're setting, actually. Here's the section thing. We could make sections here, but there's really nothing in a photographer to do that, so we won't do that. And we're not going to cache. Okay? So that's it. That's really all that's required to make this table view work, except for one thing, which is that fetch results controller, I told you it implemented all the UI table view data source things, but there's one of them it can't implement, which is cell for row and index path. Okay? It doesn't really know what attributes of the object you want to put in which parts of the UI table view cell, right? The title, the subtitle, image, it doesn't know those things. So we have to implement that ourselves. So that's UI table view cell. Cell for row and index path. You should be very, very, very familiar with this thing. It just looks like this. Cell equals self.tableview, a DQ, and these are photographers, so we'll call this photographer cell. We've got to make sure, you guys are going to keep me honest, make sure I remember to set that in the storyboard when we create one of these in the storyboard. And now I need the photographer that is at this row and section. Okay, so I'm going to import photographer first of all, not create. H. Okay, so this is photographer. And then I'm going to say photographer equals, and how do I do this? Photographer equals self.fetch results controller, object at index path, index path. Now I have the photographer that's in this row. Okay? So now that I have that, I can do things like text label dot text equals, let's say, the photographer's name, of course. Also, how about something cool like this? Cell.detail text label equals a string with format. What if I wanted to put how many photos this photographer has taken? Well, that information is readily available to me in the database. %d photos, photographer.photos count. Okay, thank you, Xcode. Appreciate the way it does that. Okay. Right, so I just go through that thing, the who took photos relationship. I just grab the photo side. It's an NS set. NS set implements count. I got what I need. Okay? And then let's return the cell. Okay, everyone understand this cell for row at index path? Question?
Fetch results controller came in from core data table view controller that we subclassed?
Yes, this property, fetch result controller, is inherited from core data table view. Exactly, good question. Okay, so let's go ahead and build our storyboard while we're at this and while we have this fresh in our mind. So here it is. This is the kind of default one we got. Let's get rid of this. We don't want this. Let's go bring out a table view. So here I'm just going to drag a table view out here. I'm going to set it to be a photographer's core data table view controller, right? Boop. And then let's set up our cell the way we want. We want it to be subtitle because it's going to have the photographer name and then how many photos they took. We need to make sure it's photographer cell is our reuse